In theaters now from MUBI is the astounding The Substance, starring Demi Moore, Margaret Qualley, and Dennis Quaid, from director Coralie Fargeat. Sorry if I mispronounced that. This was one that thankfully the trailers did not hint at too strongly what this movie's really about. And I'm not going to get too deep into the plot either. I always say most films are better if you go in blind. I know most people kind of want to have some kind of idea what they're about to pay a substantial amount of money to experience, but this was one where I was so happy that the finer points of the film were not revealed in the trailers. By now, you may know all about this film, but I'm not going to be the guy who tells you. So the basic idea of The Substance, which I thought overall was really good. The basic idea of The Substance is that Demi Moore plays an aging 50-something, perhaps early 60-something Hollywood star who has a successful exercise program. And the film begins by seeing the construction of her star on the Walk of Fame, and through just a static shot, time lapse, if you will, time passing, if you will, a static shot of that star on the Walk of Fame, we sort of see the trajectory of her career in kind of a really subtle yet brilliant way. We join the film with her taping her. I'm not going to tell you the whole story. I'm not really going to tell you much of the whole story. We join the film with her on the set performing her exercise routine. Feels very much like an 80s exercise show that used to be all over the place and all over videotape at the time. And she overhears Dennis Quaid, who plays the super gross and sleazy, gross just in his actions and his sensibility, and through a lot of extreme close-ups that are unsettling of him as he talks and eats and does things. He is the sort of gross guy who runs the network, guy who runs the show or whatever, basically saying she's too old, she's washed up, we need somebody younger and hotter to do this show. Through one thing or another, Demi Moore is introduced to The Substance, the titular substance, which is this, what do you want to call it? Mysterious, shadowy health rejuvenator that promises to create a whole new you and restore in her that which she feels like she is missing, because as she ages, as is reality, as she ages as a Hollywood starlet, she has less value in the eyes of the industry and less value in the eyes of culture because she's not, young and tight and hot anymore. She decides to engage in usage of the substance. And here's where I'm annoyingly vague. Things don't quite go the way she'd like. I really don't want to say much more about this, which is going to give the film short shrift, but also I feel like everything is to be gained by going into this movie not really knowing where it's going to go and being surprised. The film is at times shockingly gruesome and gross. There is gore in this film. There is all manner of fluids in this film. There is violencia in this film. There's nudity in this film. There's salacious camera angles in this film. Let's just say Tinto Brass would really enjoy this movie. There's copious nudity on the part of both of its leads, Margaret Qualley. I don't want to get into, let's say Margaret Qualley plays Sue. Demi Moore is Elizabeth Sparkle, and that's her actress. That's the character's name in this film, and she is on the slide. And Margaret Qualley is this young new hot property who is on the upswing that everybody falls over themselves wanting to hire to replace Demi Moore as the new icon of fitness on TV, and in a show that feels a lot like, I believe it was 20-Minute Workout. That show in the 80s that had the camera that would just sort of circle around all the people's backsides as they did lunges and squats and things like that. That show that really seemed like it was intended to exercise like kind of one muscle, if you know what I'm saying. I think you do. The new show feels like that. And it's, I'm not going to say a lot more about this. I'm sorry if this is not giving you enough plot, but let's just say this film is fascinating. It is kind of brilliant in a lot of ways. It's beautifully shot. There's just this, it seems weird to say, really fantastic hallway that we get a lot of shots of. This hallway that's with this really kind of amazing carpet and color, great use of color and lighting in this film. And it really is a film that attacks treatment of females in the media, treatment of actresses as they age, youth and beauty are everything, beauty standards, body image, all that kind of stuff. It's been in the national conversation for a good long while now. This film is a great horror sci-fi approach to that conversation, that while it goes off in these insane extreme directions, it also talks about very real things that I think a lot of the audience is going to be very sympathetic with, and it's going to connect with a lot of people depending on your age and gender, but I think probably all ages and genders will get something out of this. There's a lot to chew on in this film. Feels very much like it is influenced. Some people have said David Lynch. I get that. Certainly David Cronenberg. Certainly Frank Henenlotter and Brian Yuzna. The film, I was really with this film. I found it fascinating how the substance works, the rules that it sets up, the fact that I don't really want to get into it. So it's a conversation that we can have online, perhaps, if you want to talk about the finer points of this film, but I'm not going to ruin it for anybody who hasn't seen it here. There are something I realized about what the initial user of the substance gets out of this experience. I realized that it's kind of a big hose job when you think about it. If you've seen the movie, think about it and see what you think. If I'm understanding correctly how the thing works, the person who initially uses it ultimately doesn't really get a lot out of it, and they find that out the hard way. Brilliant film. Demi Moore's amazing in this. As they say, a very brave performance. You see every inch of Demi Moore in this film. You see her in incredibly flattering and incredibly unflattering lights. She gets to play so many roles, in a sense, in this movie. Qualley is excellent as this doe-eyed, fresh face, fresh talent, body to be exploited in this film. Dennis Quaid is just sleazy, wonderfully sleazy in this movie in so many ways. The camera uses the director uses fisheye lenses in a really wonderful way to sort of distort reality and make this much more of a weird fantasy dream nightmare at times, but also clearly a satire and a spoof of Hollywood culture, American media, and just our culture in general. And the one qualm that I had with this movie, I was really with this up to a point. And apparently it's a relatively long movie. I didn't realize as I was watching it, never felt long, but it's 2 hours and 21 minutes. So it's a 2.5 hour movie. I feel like, personally, it took a hard left or right-hand turn toward the end in the last 10, 15 minutes that I really didn't like, personally. Some people love it. Some people are all in on this film at every turn, at every level this film operates at. But for me, it does this thing toward the end where it just gets extremely gross and weird and silly. And up to that point, it was all of those things, but it just goes so over the top that it kind of lost me at the end. Personally, what I would love to recommend, if this was on video, I could do this. I would recommend stopping this film at a certain point. Now, I know you're not going to do this. I know nobody's going to do this. But I think if you stop this film, there's a point toward the end of the film where Margaret Qualley does something rash, and then she approaches a mirror that's kind of foggy, and then she wipes it off. I would say I would cut one frame in to black and credits when she wipes it off. The film keeps going for another 10 minutes or so, but to me, it would have been a better movie, for me, if it had stopped at that moment. Now, I know nobody's going to do that. Whoever hears my voice, whatever year this is you're watching this in, nobody's going to do that. You're going to keep watching it. But I bet some of you, after you hear me say this, are going to think, yeah, I probably wish I would have stopped it right there. There's this, to go off on a huge tangent, there's a big Beatles fan. There's a Beatles bootleg called A Toot and a Snore in '74. It is a recording of Paul McCartney, John Lennon, and Stevie Wonder in the studio in 1974. Now, any Beatle fan hears that and goes, oh my God, John and Paul together in the studio. I got to hear this. And I would say to you, and people had said to me, it's really not very good. It's not worth your time. Don't do it. And you're like, what are you talking about? I have to hear this. And then you listen to it and you go, yeah, it's really not worth your time. I wish I hadn't listened to that. That's kind of how I feel about the end of The Substance. It's just like, I really think it would have been better if it stopped at a certain point. I know it's trying to just hit the audience over the head or with a fire hose with it, what it's trying to say, but it just kind of took me out of how much I was enjoying the movie up to that point. Now, as time has passed and I reflect, like I walked out of the movie kind of ticked off, like Maxine had done the same thing, and another film earlier this year had done the same thing, where I'm like, I was really with it up to a point, and then you kind of threw it away. That's how I feel about The Substance, but the more that I think about The Substance subsequently, I really do think it's a really good movie. It's easily one of the best of the year. Demi Moore is amazing in this, and hopefully she gets a lot of really strong work from this movie. Everybody in it is great. I can't wait to see what the director does next. So let me know what you think. See, your mileage may vary. You may absolutely love that ending that I didn't, and think that it shouldn't have stopped 10 minutes earlier. At any rate, in theaters now as I speak from MUBI, being that it's MUBI as a streaming service, it'll clearly be on MUBI pretty soon. The Substance.